That was Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook appearing on CBS this morning earlier and talking with the host there. We're going to continue on with our panel here, and joining our panel is Nomiki Kunz. She is a CBSN political contributor, and she joins us now. So, Nomi, what are you expecting from Secretary Clinton today? Actually, let me ask you this. You supported Bernie Sanders in the past. Are you able, and are Bernie Sanders supporters in the last couple of months since Senator Sanders has dropped out, is she saying and doing the things to bring his supporters into the fold?
I think she has the majority of his supporters. But does she have all of them? Absolutely not. Does Donald Trump have all of the Republican Party? No. I think that she had to make a choice, and she made the choice to appeal to moderate Republicans, hoping that they would come and side with her. But when she made that deal, she lost a good chunk of Bernie Sanders supporters. Now, if she wants to win them, it's going to be very difficult because it's not just a Hillary Clinton issue, it's a Democratic Party issue. These are people who had absolutely no brand affiliation, the chunk of voters that are Bernie Sanders that are not going to her side, no Democratic Party affiliation, no brand loyalty to the party or to Hillary Clinton. So it has to be deeper. It has to be literally the best case any Democrat has ever made to people who would stand there for an hour and a half and listen to Bernie Sanders talk about policy. So it's not just that she believes in these issues, she connects to it on a personal level. She has to challenge her husband a little bit and you know, get down to the millennial level and say, well, I understand your problems, I feel them, I'm not just going to change my policy positions, this is how I'm going to follow through on them. I'm no longer going to accept money from X, Y, and Z special interests that conflict with my policies. You know, I pledge that I'm going to be going to college campuses and speaking to young people and listening to what they're concerned about. I think that's what she needs to do. She needs to listen more and not make it seem like it's a privilege to join her campaign, because that's what I think a lot of people are feeling.
And yet, Bob, you know, one of the if you look at the two candidates, for example, let's talk about the war in Iraq. Donald Trump has repeatedly, you know, said that he was against the war in Iraq. Well, we know that that's not true. He did not have that position. Hillary Clinton was for that war. She has apologized. She came out and said, I was wrong. But we haven't seen that from Trump. In other words, a humble Trump is one that we rarely ever see. Could we see something like that here on the debate stage?
You know, this is not a good year to make predictions because none of them ever come true. But I'm going to predict you'll never see Donald Trump apologize. I just don't think that's part of who he is. But, you know, I want to ask you something. We're talking about Bernie Sanders supporters. Are they satisfied with Hillary Clinton? How many of them went to Trump, do you think?
Oh, I think 10 across the country. I'm not kidding. Not 10%, like 10.
Yeah, we heard in various points during the campaign that, you know, the Bernie people and the Trump people all came from the same place. One blamed the government, the other blamed Wall Street for the troubles. And people were talking about a lot of his supporters might go to Trump.
He was saying it. He was saying it.
But you don't
think I think
that
that's
happened.
the point. He was trying to make it a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at their demographic, I mean, Republican Party and Trump himself are going to have a hard time making a case to millennials when they're wrong on so many core issues to them. So when you really strip it down, there's very little chance that Trump was going to attract them once they came off of Bernie. I think the bigger issue is what you were alluding to, and that is the intensity of support. Millennials and Generation X were very intensely supportive of Barack Obama when he ran both in 08 and 12. And that intensity didn't necessarily mean that he got that much larger a vote from the millennials, but he got as many of them as he could turn out for Election Day. And so the question is, what can Hillary do to excite them to get that intensity level up? Because that is the biggest problem Hillary has in her campaign is she lacks intensity with millennials. She lacks intensity with African Americans. She lacks intensity with Hispanics. She's not got that red blood kind of campaign going on. And so even though those core coalitions are in her camp, the question is, will they be in her camp in a big way?
I think part of that is also because she is a candidate that represents the party before the recession. So if you think about the millennial demographic, it's just growing. In 2008, it was very large. Now it's the largest generation in history, soon to be the largest voting bloc. And they're a party they're a group of voters that felt the effects of the economy. And so when they look at the Clintons, they see the people who created the economy and the world that they live in today. So I think it's something that goes beyond any branding strategy, any sort of authenticity that she could portray, or softening up or bulldogish attitude by taking on Donald Trump. It's really just a question of where the party goes. And I don't think they have a place to go. So it comes down to what I've had to decide, which is I don't want Donald Trump. and I want a Democratic Senate, and I'd like to, keep Roe v. Wade the way it is. So I'm voting for Hillary Clinton. I also want a woman to be president.
Do you think that's going to factor at all, Naomi, that some people will actually go into that voting booth, moderates, and maybe perhaps even some Republicans, as some Republicans have come out in support of Hillary Clinton and say, I'm going to also, in addition to all the things that I like about her in terms of her policy, I like having a woman president and vote for that, or do you think that's not a factor?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's something, she hasn't made it her #1 issue. If you recall, in 2008, she didn't make it her #1 issue either,
right.
and I think that they've played the woman card, like as she's called it, a little bit more, but it's more in comparison to how Donald Trump treats women, rather than, oh my goodness, we have a woman, the first woman in a one-on-one staged debate on stage who could be president. And I think a lot of women who feel the effects of sexism their entire lives will quietly be going into deciding that's it.
Rick, I'm curious, talking about the millennial vote, for example, how did the numbers break down in 2008? Clearly, then Senator Obama had a lot of millennials break for him, but you bought some to the McCain ticket, did you not?
Yeah, no, it was a generational change that was occurring. As Emily talked, the millennial generation was just starting to come into the voting bracket. 91 million millennials, and most of them were under the age of 18 by the time the 2008 campaign took place. So it wasn't as big a factor. But what Barack Obama represented was an opportunity for young people to really enter into the equation politically. And, being one of the youngest candidates for president at that time, that was pretty exciting to them. And the juxtaposition was John McCain at that time was the oldest candidate for president ever. And so I don't want to attribute it only to that issue, but when you look at things they care about now, like climate, there was really no difference in the position that John McCain had with Barack Obama on climate. So it wasn't going to divide that pie. When you looked at things like campaign finance reform, John McCain had a lot of appeal to young people because of the corruption around campaign finance. So there weren't those kind of barriers like there are today on a substantive basis. So I look at it more generationally, in that there was a change happening. And what happened is, when that locked in for Barack Obama, the Democratic Party did a very good job of keeping the communication open to those millennials, so that as they came into the voting bloc, they had a home to go to.
It's really interesting. Bob, before we go to the next segment, I want to ask you one last question, tapping your expertise and your experience. Donald Trump has sort of branded himself as a law and order candidate. A lot of people have said that smacks of Richard Nixon back in the early 70s. Do you see a similarity, or is there a sharp contrast between law and order Nixon and law and order Trump?
Well, some people would even say that's a kind of a dog whistle kind of law and order, because that's what Richard Nixon said. But I do think this. I think people are worried about their safety, and I think they are worried about this whole business of terrorism. And, Trump has painted a very dark picture coming out of the Republican convention. And I don't believe most Americans think the picture is that dark and that bleak. But by the same token, they don't think everything is hunky-dory. They do know there's a terrorist threat out there, and they want somebody to explain to them how we can make this place safe again. And I'm not sure she has really answered that question from how she plans to combat this, or that the threat is really as serious as I think most people think it is. And I think that's a big challenge for her tonight, and I think she could build support by explaining realistically, number one, that she does recognize there's a threat out there, and number two, how she's going to go about resolving it.
Although I saw a startling statistic in a book that Brian Burrows wrote about a period in the 70s. There was an 18-month period in the early 70s where there were several hundred domestic bombings in this country, nowhere near the kind of attacks that we've seen here in the United States with regards to ISIS, the Weather Underground and the Symbian Army and all these things. But now people feel it more probably because of 24-hour news cycle and social media, et cetera. This has been a great discussion. Naomi Coates, as always. Bob Schieffer, thank you very much. Rick Davis, always great to talk to you guys. Thank you so much.